Our new brake pads are really cool. You're not even gonna believe it. Like, let's say you're driving along the road with your family, and you're driving along, la-li-la, woo, and then all of a sudden there's a truck tire in the middle of the road, and you hit the brakes. Whoa, that was close. Now let's see what happens when you're driving with the other guy's brake pads. You're driving along, and all of a sudden the kids are yelling from the back seat, I gotta go to the bathroom, Daddy. Not now, damn it. Truck tire. I can't stop. Help! There's a cliff. And your family's screaming, oh my God, we're burning alive! No, I can't feel my legs! In comes a meat wagon! Wee, wee, wee. And the medic gets out and says, oh my God! New guy's in the corner puking his guts out. All because you want to save a couple extra pennies.
The next handful of minutes, believe it or not, are brought to you by Grapplex. Grapplex, it won't come undone. Or it will. Whatever's sexier.
Shaking cold, these hands are meant to hold. Speak to me when all you gotta keep is strong. Move along like I know you do. And even when your hope is gone, move along just to make it through. Move along. You've lost yourself completely. Could be a night when your life ends. Such a heart that will lead you to deceiving. All the pain held in your hands are shaking cold. Your hands are mine to hold. Speak to me when all you gotta keep is strong. Move along like I know you do. And even when your hope is gone, move along just to make it through. Move along. When everything is wrong, we move along. When everything is wrong, we move when all you gotta keep is strong. Move along like I know you do. And even when your hope is gone, move along just to make it through. When all you gotta keep is strong, move along like I know you do. And even when your hope is gone, move along just to make it through. When all you gotta keep is strong, move along like I know you do. And even when your
What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 15 of the 69-minute Eargasm. I am Grant Fletcher, the producer of this show, and with us, as always, is the man of the hour, the man who brings us all together, the quintessential stud muffin, Joel Gertner. Joel, how are you?
Oh, whoa, 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 ooh. Is it really episode 15, Grant Fletcher?
It is episode 15. It's only our 7th episode together, but yeah, episode 15.
Wow. That's great news. That's great stuff. Is it so it's episode 15 of volume 2?
Right, episode 15, volume 2, Return of the Stud Muffin.
Oh, because there were about a good dozen, maybe 15 episodes, and when I say good, I mean great, of volume 1. So that means in our entire anthology here, we are coming up on, we've got about 25 or 30 episodes now. And our YouTube channel is coming dangerously close to 500 subscribers. And at 500, Steve Kaufman, who is the YouTube channel guy for all of Conrad's people, and I think Ric Flair, and I think perhaps X-Pac, and he does a bunch of YouTube stuff. He's going to jump in and start helping us and putting some of the stuff on YouTube with title cards and B-roll and all sorts of stuff. It's going to be really cool. So I can't wait. And pretty soon we are going to have available clips and access one way or the next to all 25 or 30 of the eargasms that we have so far recorded and all eargasms going forward. If you'd like to help us get to 500 subscribers and then to 1,000, which is big for us, that unleashes a lot of cookies, prizes, medals, and stuff that helps like a condensed URL. Please go to YouTube, search Joel Gertner, and the channel will be, depending on the size of your device, depending on the day, it will be either the top screen, or if it's not, it'll be the second or third screen. But it should definitely be in your first 20 or 25 search results.
Yeah, it's almost too much. It's right up to the point of eargasm as your doctor might advise you to consume without actually going over.
Yeah, and if you have an eargasm for over 4 hours, I don't know why you would call your doctor. You should call a friend. And if, by the way, you're listening to any individual episode of Eargasm for over 4 hours, then it means you must have hit a button once or twice to loop it, because these shows don't go that long, no matter how long it might feel.
Yeah, and if you do go that long, you really should just take to Twitter to thank Joel for the experience. He's at Studmuffin Says. You can hit me up too. I'm at Grant L. Fletcher.
Yeah, and if you want to find me on Instagram, you can find me at Quintessential Stud Muffin. And if you want to let me see your Instagram and any pictures that you might have up there, you could even send me one via Instagram DM if you wanted to. You could do that there as well, Quintessential Stud Muffin on Instagram.
Yeah, actually, you know what? Can I shout out a couple Instagram accounts that I've come across here that I think are pretty awesome?
Yeah, man, I'd prefer you did.
Well, there's one that's at Pro Wrestling 101, pro_wrestling_101. They're pretty awesome. They're always posting some really cool stuff. And then a more recent follower we have too. We had Charles Lyon there. I don't know if you saw that or not.
You know what? I saw Charles Lyon in Vegas. I think that name rings a bell as somebody who put up a picture of me and him at the Cauliflower Alley Club, which is something else we're going to talk about. But I think I've got the right person, don't I?
Yeah, you do. Yeah. At I am Charles Lyon. He's one of those super fans of yesteryear that you see. You know, like these days you see the green smiley face shirt guy and the guy with the long hair in the front row at WWE. You know, he was who I think they call bowl cut kid online these days. I mean, granted,
yeah.
He neither has a bowl cut nor is he a kid anymore. But, you know, definitely a fixture in Attitude Era WWF, you know, now WWE for sure. So anyways, yeah, just wanted to go ahead and shout those people out. I think they're great. I think we should give credit where credit's due. With
Hell yeah.
who posted
they
great
deserve
content.
it.
Yeah, we got a lot to cover today. Joel, speaking of Cauliflower
It sounded
Alley
like
Club.
it sounded like, to interrupt you for 1 second, it sounded like when you ... when you were doing it verbally with your voice like that, it sounded almost like the theme song to one of our more popular shows on the Joel Gertner YouTube channel, and that's Quintessential Cuisine. And the theme song when we're starting to cook is "What's going on in the kitchen? What's going on in the kitchen? What's going on?" So it's like that. And it kind of reminded me of that when you did that. Guys, I mean, honestly, You want to see cooking, you want to see unbox, you want to see wrestling, you want to see baseball card auctions that go to St. Jude's, you want to see scratch off lottery. I mean, anything, including I'm going to actually, we have an episode that we're going to be filming part of later this week on Thursday. So about 3 days from when we're recording this right now. That episode will be something that you guys probably are hearing in 1 week, 2 weeks, whenever the case may be. But we're going to do part of it video. We're going to document it, put it up on, can't really do it on YouTube Live yet, unless we get to 1,000 subscribers. So maybe I'll put it on Facebook or something like that. But it should be a blast. And where was I going with that?
I don't know where you're going. I am glad you brought it up, though, because at some point in time, I was going to request that you did sing the theme song to Quintessential Cuisine on this show. So I'm glad you put it out there and I didn't have to ask you to do it.
I guess what I'm saying is even the stuff that I'm going to be recording this Thursday, even, wherever I travel, wherever I go, we've got an announcement that I'll be making on next week's show. But no matter where it is, I'm going to start video documenting stuff a lot more frequently. And it's going to be stuff that gets purposed on the YouTube channel. It can't get purposed yet on YouTube Live, so it is going to get purposed on the YouTube channel. So it's just kind of a reminder and a reiteration, re-recommendation that you please do search Joel Gertner or the Joel Gertner channel at YouTube, and please do not only watch our free high-quality video content, but please do ring our bell and subscribe.
Yeah, definitely. Also the YouTube channel thing does also remind me of something else. On the last episode, it's been a while. We appreciate you guys being patient with us on putting out this episode. But on the last episode, we did discuss a wager, you and I. If you remember, we talked about, could I get to 500 followers on Twitter at Grant L. Fletcher before you got to 10,000 at Stud Muffin Says. And we discussed what that wager would be. Do you remember that?
I don't remember what the prize was at the end of the line, but the fact that you're bringing it up, I mean, I've lived enough life and I've watched enough television and I've read enough Aesop's fables that if you're bringing this up, it's not because you like to tout your own failure and it's not because you like to wave your own poo-poo in front of your face. So I'm guessing that even though I am still 240 followers away from 10,000 and sitting there trying my best to get to 9,800, I am guessing that you have already attained your 500, and I'd like to congratulate you on that. And no, go ahead.
No.
Assuredly, go ahead. Oh, no, this is all just so that you could try to remind the people about the wager and get them to follow either of us?
Yeah, no, that's no, because what I was going to say is you and I are right at about the same number of followers we needed to hit our goal as of this, so that's why I was bringing it up. And we didn't really discuss the terms. I thought I kind of had an idea for what I would like you to do, though, if and when I do win this wager, if you'd like to hear it.
Yeah, I think it's that you would like to be able, if you win, to borrow an evening of my time, fly me in to the great metroplex of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. You would like to take me to the town's best Brazilian barbecue, Churrascaria Rodizio Steakhouse, which is on a national level, I think, I think Food Magazine rated it a meh. And I think you wanted to go ahead and pay for the two of us to have a beautiful, beautiful high protein dinner. Am I close?
That does sound like a great idea. Sounds like a wonderful dinner. I would love to have the meat sweats with you at some point in time, Joel. Maybe in June.
Now when you're talking about the meat sweats, the price goes up.
Oh my! I didn't realize we were getting into primo territory here.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, no, I was thinking kind of what we'd do is we'd give you a piece of content for your YouTube channel, and if I win, we just get you to perform from The Wizard of Oz, If I Were King of the Forest by the Cowardly Lion, and upload it to your YouTube channel. What do you think of that? In character.
I'm so unfamiliar. I've probably watched that movie in its entirety, maybe only twice in my life. I'm so unfamiliar that I can't even hear the song in my head, but I guess that's what makes it all the more entertaining, challenging, and worthy as a wager. So I accept. Did I come up with something where when I win, it's the thing that you actually wind up doing, or no?
No, not yet. Not yet. That's what I'm saying. I'm laying that out there just because it's something I could see you doing at some point in time. So I think it could and should happen.
Yeah, and then as long as we're it's fun to deal in entertainment and fun and but now let's if we're going to deal in reality for a second, why don't we figure out what it is that I should propose as a prize for this wager to happen, when indeed I actually do win.
Yeah, I think you should. I think you should go right ahead and let us know.
I'm going to mull it over. I'm going to take my time. Honestly, like nobody ever rushed into a good idea. I'm going to give it some thought, and I'm going to give it some mental merit, and I'm going to really put my mind into it. And I'll get back to you on it, Grant Fletcher.
Yeah, I mean, look, I certainly didn't. I had a lot of time to think about it because here's the thing. I really don't have a life. Whereas you are, you're out there doing the conventions and you're making the Cauliflower Alley reunion and you're making shots. And this is all I have. This is everything I got. And so, I spent probably too much time thinking about this in particular, if you actually knew how much time I spend thinking about this project.
Grant Fletcher, I think you sell yourself short sometimes. Maybe not necessarily on this. You might be somewhat right. And things might even be, for you, dare I say, slightly more boring than you're lending credence to. But the few people, your circle of friends, that those who really love you and like you, especially the ones who can tolerate you. More often than not, have some reasonably wonderful things that they can stretch out of themselves into saying about you to put you over. And I'm slowly starting to figure out that they may perhaps not be outright lying when they do that.
Yeah.
So, and I just want to let you know all that because I think peace of mind is very important, and I'm a motivating influence. A lot of people look to me. I'm sort of like a Gary V of professional wrestling, and yeah, I just wanted you to have that to put in your back pocket. That things are not as boring, things are not as bad, things are not as slow, things are not as mundane as they sometimes might seem. And if they ever do seem that way to you, it's just because every now and again, perhaps you do have a good, firm grasp on reality.
Well, good. That's good to know. That does put me at ease. And, I think we've gone on enough, guys. I mean, there's a lot to talk about on this episode. First and foremost, I mean, you just got back how many days ago from the Cauliflower Alley Club reunion?
Yeah, let's call it 4.
4 days ago.
Yeah.
So tell us about that experience. This was your first one, right?
Yeah, it was my first time in Vegas. We had urban legend is that the last November to remember 2000, was supposed to be, or a hard candidate for it, was Mandalay Bay through the Jason Hervey connection, wrestling, in Vegas. And so it didn't happen at Mandalay Bay. Urban legend is from there that there was even a consideration of trying to put it at Nassau Coliseum on Long Island. It wound up being at the Odeum in Villa Park, Illinois, outside Chicago. And believe it or not, like I've been to New Orleans a dozen or 15 times, and I had never, prior to last week, been to Las Vegas once.
Yeah, nor have I. So I think really it's worth me looking into a membership to Cauliflower Alley Club just for the opportunity to go.
And I hope I don't get heat for this because I haven't 100% running up the flagpole and cleared it, line item. So I hope I don't get heat for this, especially if this show drops in the next 1, 2, 3 days real soon before I have a chance to get it cleared. I hope I don't get heat for this, but I will say that if you had met me in my personal life just a week or two ago and asked me at the age of 43 if I had ever been to Las Vegas, I would have told you no. But if you meet me 3 weeks from now and ask me if I had ever been to Las Vegas, I would tell you that I have been to Las Vegas not once, but twice.
Oh, pray
and
tell.
without going Well, and because the second time is going to be me leaving here towards the end of the month, around Memorial Day, and I can neither confirm nor deny anything else right here on this episode. But you people who are listening, you wrestling fans, might have an idea of what is going on in Vegas that I might be at the end of the month. And when we are doing housekeeping and putting a pretty bow on all of the content we have for you for next episode of the Eargasm in a week or two, I will certainly have and be able to divulge more details about my second of 2 spring 2019 Vegas excursions.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a wrestling fan, you've been paying attention, you have a Twitter account, you got a pulse, you know what we're talking about. We don't really have to lay it out here for you.
I was about to say, too, if you can't wait another week or two, if you can't wait until the next episode of the Eargasm to find out more details on why, where, and when I'll be in Vegas next time in a couple or 3 weeks, then do follow me on social media, on Twitter at StudMuffinSays, on Instagram at Quintessential StudMuffin.
Yeah, but make sure if you follow him, you also follow me, because there's something on the line here, guys.
Yeah, we have a wager going on, so make sure you follow me and then look at Grant's stuff and try to glean everything you can and squeeze out all the free milk that'll drip on you. But do not, by any means, do not for sure follow him, because giving him a point while giving me a point means that net, you are giving me nothing. And if there's anything that I've learned from being in the wrestling business for about 28 years, it's that wrestling fans are not supposed to give nothing. They're supposed to put it out there and give everything of themselves, all of the love, all of the kind words. That's what I've always experienced. So be a true team player, and by that I mean not just for Team Eargasm, but in this case for Team Stud Muffin, and go ahead and follow me. And as for Grant Fletcher, if you're feeling charitable, if you're feeling benevolent, then go on ahead and, I guess you do you. I'm having a real nice moment where, even though what's on the line is you having me dress up as some sort of, you want me to do a Cowardly Lion gimmick with bow tie and neck brace and all this nonsense, I can only imagine, I can see the picture that's going on in your mind, me doing this kind of musical kind of, it's ridiculous. It's never going to happen. But, if me pulling back on the reins and saying, okay, sure, follow Grant Fletcher and all of his social media endeavors, if that helps you get to sleep 1 minute earlier tonight, then you know what? Fine. Yeah. And I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting you putting on the whole gimmick. I mean, if you're offering that up, then sure, that wasn't what I was.
I don't do nothing half-ass. If I'm going to sing that song that I don't know and have to learn it and have to make a spectacle of myself, I just want you to know I don't do anything half-ass. I do it with my whole ass. As they say in that movie, Step Up, you can do it, put your ass into it. And if I have to be an ass, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put my ass into it. By God. And by definition.
Legend has it that was your nickname in high school, whole ass Gertner, right? So, I had a lot of nicknames in high school, too. I wouldn't really go into them into great detail, though. So I feel like this podcast is kind of my way of trying to scrub that from my past anyway. I probably shouldn't have brought it up.
Yeah, and that's your prerogative. If you want now for the rest of the day to be thinking about what life was like for little Grant Fletcher, little Fletch Jr., little Fletcherino, little Grantino, little, whatever it is. And the nicknames, I can only imagine, man. I mean, knowing you in your adult life now, just thinking about how things might have been for you as you, rolled through high school, I can only imagine what those nicknames might have been. But yeah, man, it's fun to revisit the past.
Yeah, sure. Fun. Not what I would have labeled it as. But sure. Also, yeah, if you guys have any suggestions for what Joel's prize should be, should he win this wager, go ahead and tweet them at us as well.
Oh, yeah, I'll take a good idea, and anything that makes Grant look like a little bit of a buffoon or puts him out a little bit or just puts a little sting in his ding and lets us realize that challenging me and making a wager and trying to compete against me and defeat me in any kind of competitive contest is a terrible idea. By all means, send those to us via social media. and we will absolutely take them under advisement.
Yes, absolutely. We've been rapping here for about 20 minutes, Joel. I think we've had our guest waiting in the wings here for a while. What do you say?
I say you're right. I say we've got a great guest this week. I say that before I saw him again at Cauliflower Alley for the first time in easily 25 years, I was on the phone with John Arezzi of Pro Wrestling Spotlight fame. He's the person that helped get Vince Russo in the wrestling business, and that's something that he's gone back and forth in life and in his career, sometimes regretting, and sometimes not. Vince Russo, by the way, a friend of our program, and has been on Volume 1 and Volume 2. But John is one of those people that has things to say about Vince Russo. And when we talked, he had a lot to say about wrestling conventions. Now that StarCast, WrestleCade, WrestleCon, things like these, there was just a big one last week in the UK. Wrestling conventions are a big part of wrestling society now. And there was a time where they weren't. There was a time where it was just kind of once a year. He was really the only one doing them. And that time was the early 90s. It's a time where without his conventions, I wouldn't have gotten to meet a lot of wrestling legends and a lot of people that became colleagues. And it was just, it was really great for somebody like me, about 15 years old, growing up in the wrestling business, to be a part of his stuff and experience it. We talk about that. We talk about all kinds of stuff he's been doing inside of and outside of the wrestling business. And it's really just, if you're a student of pro wrestling, and if you've gone to conventions, if you're thinking about going to conventions, it really is a stellar episode. I mean, it was fun to record, and listening back, it's just a great time, and we hope you're all going to enjoy it.
Yeah, this show is a show. It's about great conversations. It's a show about great stories, and this interview, it delivers on both counts.
Yeah, absolutely. And John's a hell of a guy. He's to be supported in anything he does. He's got a book project. He's got all kinds of things he's doing. He's out in Nashville. He does talent development. He went into music. There's a singer, Kelsey Ballerini. And Kelsey Ballerini, he discovered her before her career ever took off. And now she's a millionairess. I mean, now she's a top country singer. He's the one that found her. Doing talent development, like I said, for a label out there. And now I think he's freelancing and doing some stuff for himself, kind of showing talent how to go from being monsters to being bigger monsters and really unleash and utilize their social media. He's doing a lot of great, crazy things. He's back into the wrestling game. He's a guy that refound his love, his appreciation of wrestling after a hiatus, came back to professional wrestling. He reminds me, similar but different, but he reminds me of kind of a Tony Schiavone type, where he's back on the scene. You see him now, he's refreshed, loving being around wrestling again. And that's certainly the vibe I got from him when we reunited for the first time in over a quarter of a century at Cauliflower Alley last week.
Yeah, much love to Tony Schiavone. If you haven't listened to What Happened When, shout out to that show. You guys should definitely check that out. And it's a lot of fun. He discovered a millionairess, or, someone who became a millionairess. I mean, if only we could be so lucky, right?
Yeah, if only.
You know what? I'll tell you what. I was going to say if we had musical talent, but I mean, look at us both. We have musical talent. I used to sing in a metal band, years ago. And tell you what, when I hit 500 followers, I'll go ahead and I will release a track from said band on Twitter.
I should be referred to then also as a talent developer, because I have gotten so many women to sing. You know what I mean? Like there's been so much shake, rattle and roll, rattle and hum, and just kind of ooh ah and just kind of melodious, dulcet tones and just singing coming from the women of the United States and the world through me. That I think, and that's I'd like to teach the world to sing, and by the world I mean the 52% that's women, and by the 52% that's women, I mean, some restrictions apply.
Yeah, I would imagine that you trained them to extend their range quite well.
And you would have to imagine not so vividly, although I'm guessing that every night, as you review your day and think about what the next might bring, it doesn't stop you from vividly attempting to imagine the exploits of the quintessential stud muffin and random said woman in a, let's call it a soundproof booth, although it's not quite a booth. And again, when I'm involved and said woman is involved, absolutely nothing for sure is soundproof.
Rumors abound that there is video footage. Let's hope it never sees the light of day.
All right.
That's what you're into, in which case, carry on.
Every now and again you'll say something and I'll think about Lance Russell calling Memphis TV and just being like, all right. Like Lawler drops the strap and he's gonna and or somebody says something completely egregious and reprehensible, and Lance Russell will be like, all right. And that's sometimes that's what runs through the back of my mind when you open up your mouth and you're a hell of a guy, dude. You really are a nice guy. I'm so giving you the opportunity to be a part of this show and jump on a rocket ship here and just ride my coattails to the top, I think is something that was unexpected when I did it in regards to you. But in relation to you, man, I just, I wouldn't have it any other way. You are a good hand. You are willing to put in a lot of time and a lot of work and devote that to me and to the show and to me. You've got a lot of love for me. And I can't reciprocate all of it because it'll swell your head, and you'll start to think that on a personal level beyond the show that I like you, and that would be we'd be treading through murky water then and dangerous territory. But as it relates to levels of me being able to put up with you, you're okay in my book.
Oh, shucks, Joe, you're going to make me blush if you say that. And I'm not the wordsmith that you are, but you're pretty all right with me, too.
Yeah, I appreciate you.
On that heartwarming note, we've probably let our listeners waiting here for long enough. What do you say?
Yes, sir. Let's get into it. This is the 69-minute eargasm with this week's guest, John Arezzi.
And well, we are back with more of the 69-minute eargasm. Our guest at this time is, it's ironic almost to be speaking to him in the medium of a podcast. It's coincidental, I guess. He's launching his own. He's at the process now, the point where he's starting going into podcasting himself. But it's ironic, though, to be talking to this man in the form of a podcast, because he is one of the foremost wrestling radio show hosts from my kind of growing up, my formative years, my developmental period, getting into the wrestling business just before getting in, just after getting in, talking about the early 90s. And this man was on the scene with there were only two shows. One of them was on in the middle of the night. I guess we'll talk about that momentarily. But this was the show to listen to. All of the top stars from all of the top promotions, from the independents, anybody who was anybody clamored to get onto the over-the-air New York City airwaves. But what makes this gentleman so unique is that he's so diverse within pro wrestling, and I think that's something that I'm going to be glad to kind of show some light on, just kind of shine a light, because I don't want to. Your show used to be the Pro Wrestling Spotlight, so I don't want to say anything that's too corny, but I want to. I'm going to get right into it. This man has done it all. Literally, he's been around the ring. He's been in the ring. He's been on the airwaves talking about ring things. And by the way, you may not think every time you eat about who invented the fork, but every time I appear at a WrestleCon or a WrestleCade or a StarCast, and I see all of the different people who are trying to put their mark on wrestling conventioneering and make these events the biggest and the best that they can ever be, I hearken back and think to, in my youth, the conventions of my era that I first went to, and this is the man that was responsible for putting all of those together. And in the New York City area, dare I say, in the entire kind of that quadrant of the country, if you were a wrestling fan and you lived there, He was the man that made your wrestling dreams and wishes come true as you got to meet all the big stars of the day. We're going to talk all about it with the man, John Arezzi. John, how are you doing?
Wow, that's quite the intro. Thank you so much, Joel. It's a pleasure to be here, my friend.
I appreciate hearing that. Dude, it's amazing. It's full circle, and it's amazing in a lot of different ways, man. It's amazing because, trying to get into the wrestling business early to mid-'90s, and your show was on the air, and I listened to your show every weekend, every Sunday, and I thought maybe there might be a day, if I were lucky enough and if I were so blessed, that I would be able to be a guest on your radio show and that you might be able to interview me the same way you interviewed the Paulie Dangerously's and all of the great talkers of the time. And now we're doing podcasts, man, and here I am, a wrestling talker, and I never thought the shoe would be on the other foot where I might be interviewing you before you interviewed me, but I still consider it a blessing nonetheless. It's great to see you back, extremely active on the scene. What I want to ask, though, I want to kind of go back to the beginning, kind of to childhood and kind of to the beginning of your involvement in wrestling, and just tell everybody what got you interested in it, from what perspective you were interested, and then kind of as you're getting into the business, the first thing or two that you're doing, just kind of walk us through your journey, if you don't mind.
Oh, not a problem. I mean, it's been a pretty interesting ride, and it came with a couple of periods of time, including this past one, that I was pretty much out of it for 25 years. But getting back to the very early beginning, I became a wrestling fan probably at the age of 6 or 7, watching the old Washington, D.C. WWWF shows promoted by Capital Wrestling. And I just kind of fell in love with the product and watching Bruno Sammartino and Spiros Arion and Antonio Pugliese and the Sicilians and all of those great stars of the early 60s. I just had a love for the business. And then I started and discovered the newsstand wrestling magazines around 1967. I was 10 years old, so it got me deeper involved with learning the territories, different champions, different stars, because I was unaware that there was anyone out there wrestling and promoting wrestling outside of the New York metropolitan area as a 10-year-old until I started reading the magazines. And then I started reading about this incredible heel named Fred Blassie, who overcame adversity and was one of the most frightening wrestlers around the country. So I kind of gravitated to him. I just kind of admired him. And as a youngster, as a 14-year-old, you're obviously too young, but when you were a kid, you couldn't even get into live shows in New York unless you were 14 years old. So I started attending live shows when I was able to at the age of 14, and I had this crazy idea that I'd like to start a fan club because I was reading about a lot of fan clubs in the newsstand magazines, and I wanted to start a fan club for Fred Blassie. So I was corresponding with Jeff Walton, who had run Freddie's fan club and was so prominent as a publicist for the Olympic Auditorium in Los Angeles. So using his guidance a little bit, I filled out a permission slip, took it to Madison Square Garden at the end of 71 when Blassie came in, and I was able to get the permission slip signed by a security guard who took it in the back. I wasn't allowed backstage, and they gave me the permission slip back, and I sent it to Jeff for verification. He said it was real. And I started the King of Men newsletter for Fred Blassie at a very young age, at the age of 14 years old. And then in 1973, got a letter from Freddie, got several letters from Fred, and he invited me on March 26, 1973, to go backstage and meet him because I had put out 2 or 3 newsletters at the time called King of Men. So that's what kind of got me backstage, and then I won Fan Club of the Year in 1974 from the Wrestling Fans International Association and the Best Monthly Wrestling Bulletin, and Bill Apter named my Fan Club of the Year in 74, and started basically freelancing and sending stories into the newsstand magazines, and lo and behold, at the age of 15 years old, I started selling stories to the magazines. And that continued on. In 1975, I went to college, and I started the very first incarnation of Pro Wrestling Spotlight as a weekly 1-hour show on our college radio station. And because I was then integrating myself and getting backstage access, and I talked my way onto the photographer's row at Madison Square Garden, so I was shooting ringside alongside legends George Napolitano and Bill Apter and the Japanese photographers. So it was kind of a whirlwind year. I just kept advancing. And with Pro Wrestling Spotlight, 1975, 1976 version, I was interviewing a lot of the performers in the WWWF at the time and airing them on this little college station. Then as my college days started to wind down, I really didn't see myself having a career in the business. I had aspirations to work in baseball or in sports, and I decided to kind of bullshit my way into performing. And I talked my way through Grand Wizard of Wrestling, Ernie Roth, into booking me at a television taping in Philadelphia on January 10th, 1978. And there was a place where I shot matches at for several years, actually, 2-3 years. And I made a hasty decision to get into the ring, telling them that I had some experience, telling Monsoon I had some experience working some independents in the South. So I had no training, which was idiotic. And I went into the ring. I had no training at all.
Unbelievable.
I told the story to Conan recently. He goes, "You didn't get killed. They didn't kill you. They didn't beat the shit out of you." No, they did not. But I did.
I saw a match. There was a match
going
around Twitter. There was a match going around Twitter a couple days ago, and I saw a match with. I've seen a few doozies. I mean, I was a tape trader also around the time that you were on the air in the early '90s, and I was here. And I was a tape trader. So I've seen a few doozies. I mean, anybody who's familiar with Ken Patera versus Judo Joe Black, there's been a lot of really weird stuff that's made air and that's been taped. And there was this one going around Twitter, man. Sergeant Slaughter is in there with this guy who looks like he's never been trained to do anything. Open up a piece of mail, flush nothing, just let alone wrestling. He's just way over his head, and it was so bizarre to watch. Weren't you concerned that you might get hurt?
You know what? It didn't even enter my mind. It should have, because I did get my ass handed to me by Dusty. Because while we're in the ring, obviously I didn't know what I was doing, and I just recently found out that McMahon, who knew me, Vince knew me, went to George Napolitano and said, this guy is a worker. And George said, no, not really. He's my friend, but I didn't know he was doing that. So I didn't. I just went in there, and I it was obvious from the minute the bell rang that I didn't know what I was doing. And Dusty basically whispered in my ear, I got to teach you a lesson. And he really, his bionic elbows were pretty stiff on top of my head, enough to disorientate me. Wow. And then when I got pinned, basically that was it. And then I went in for another match, a tag team match on the same TV taping, teaming with a dude from Catania, Sicily, Joe Turco. And they put us in against Peter Maivia and Chief Jay Strongbow. And in that match, I wasn't allowed to enter the entire match until the finish, when I got thrown in from over the top, thrown into the arms of Maivia, who gave me a headbutt, and then Strongbow covered me, 1, 2, 3. And that's kind of the end of my career. I was scheduled to wrestle Backlund in the third hour of that taping, and then they had seen enough, I guess, and they were like, "Well, that's enough for him." And ironically, I go to Madison Square Garden the night Backlund wins the title from Graham, and I take my position at ringside like I had since 1975, right up there, photographer's row. And they sent somebody, Mel Phillips, I believe it was, to come get me and take me out of the ringside photographer's row. And so you were just on a TV taping 3 weeks ago, and you can't be taking pictures now. And so that ended my first career in wrestling. And it was kind of an ending for me that I envisioned happen anyway. I wanted to see what it was like to be in the ring. I got to write about it for an article in Ring Wrestling magazine. It came out. And later on, years later, I got Dusty to sign that magazine, which was kind of cool.
God. You're like
so I left it.
You're like
a Brazilian or a cat or just insane. So I basically got out of the wrestling business, stayed on the peripheral, came back to shoot a little bit in 1982 when I got out of college, and I had been in the music business then after working for the New York Mets for a little bit, and I basically stayed out of the business most of the 80s. And my music management company in New York was struggling, and it went under in 1989, and I needed something to fall back on. And I was like, well, I still like wrestling. Maybe I could do something here. And I started the commercial radio version of Pro Wrestling Spotlight on April the 9th, 1989, which is basically 30 years from this week. And that's when the radio show started. Yeah.
Wow, 30 years this week. I didn't even realize it.
Yeah, that's kind of one of the reasons why I'm kind of reviving the new version of this Pro Wrestling Spotlight called Pro Wrestling Spotlight Then and Now, which will debut within probably 30 days from now. So in the 80s, as you know, I was kind of the first person, other than WFAN had Rich Mancuso, as you know, in the middle of the night on Saturday into Sunday nights with Jody McDonald. But my show started off as a kayfabe show. I mean, it started off, wanting to keep everything in character and follow storylines. And by the second episode of Pro Wrestling Spotlight, when I had Bruno Sammartino on, who spoke not very kindly about what was going on in the business in WWF, after that interview aired, when I decided to air that interview, the WWF stopped cooperating. So they cooperated for one show, my very first show, where they gave me Jimmy Hart as a guest. And that was kind of it. But following that pace, the WCW at the time, NWA, was very cooperative. So I was getting backstage. I was doing these incredible interviews, following the storylines. And then when Ricky Steamboat left over the contract dispute in August of '89, I got him to come on Pro Wrestling Spotlight to talk about what happened. And that was kind of like behind the scenes, tearing the curtain down of why a performer left an organization, shortly after he was the world champion. And Dave Meltzer picked up on it, wrote it in the newsletter, and my audience kind of just grew. And I decided at that time, well, let's kind of cover the business in a way that maybe has not been covered before, by tearing that curtain down every week and talking about the stuff that's really going on. And that's how the show evolved. And then, decided that, I wanted to get an opportunity. I always kind of did this as a fan anyway. I wanted to find a platform where fans and wrestlers could get together on an informal basis, which was the reason why I started the Wrestling Fan Conventions, the first one in 1990, and that was the Weekend of Champions. So it evolved from that. I did those things, and I basically, if we're talking about a synopsis of the 1990s, all the scandals that broke, all the controversy that was going on, me promoting the wrestling conventions, then doing a deal to bring AAA into the United States with Ron Skoler and Conan, putting that deal together. So I started promoting, and then, I'm sure I don't know if you want to get into it, but then I found, Vince Russo, and I'll just bring it over to you. I mean, just fast forwarding to right now, I don't know how you want to proceed with this, because there's a lot to cover, but
sure.
I decided that this year was the time to come back in, and I have some big plans for this year and next.
Well, I want to talk with you for sure about how the show that's coming back, this new one, how you'd like it to be similar, how you'd like it to be different, how it compares to the show from the late 80s, early 90s. And then also where you think it fits kind of on the current spectrum and what you're kind of hoping to accomplish. All that, I want to get into it. But since you mentioned it, and I was going to mention it pretty soon, is that on a trivia note, on the trivia end of things, and listen, he like you, as tenacious and persistent. And if he's anything like me, and he is, he would have got into the wrestling business probably anyway. But in actuality, in real trivia, you did give the wrestling world Vince Russo.
Yes, I did.
And Vince has been on the show twice. He's been on Volume 1. He's been on Volume 2. So Vince has been a guest of ours and always a very honest, candid guest and kind of, puts his viewpoints out there, front and center. Talk a little bit about Vince Russo that you knew when you met him, Vince Russo through the years, and are you glad Vince Russo is somebody that you discovered and gave a chance?
All right, that's all encompassing, but let's answer it honestly as I can, and which will be 100% honest. I met Vince through a listener of mine, a kid named Andrew Goldberger, who's now reconnected with me, ironically, after 27 years, who's become a multimillionaire. He was just this nerdy kid who said there was a video store out in Coram, Long Island, run by a guy named Vince Russo, who booked some wrestlers for personal appearances. He might be a good advertiser for you, because I was always struggling to keep the show on. Those were the days where no one wanted a wrestling show. So you had to buy your time, broker your time from the station, and then sell the advertising, and you keep the proceeds. And it was a struggle. So I met Vince in the latter part of the summer of 1991, and he had interest in advertising Will Drill's video store on the Pro Wrestling Spotlight, and I booked Honky Tonk Man for him for a personal appearance. And he wanted to get into the wrestling business, and he had a journalism degree, and he wanted to start a newsletter, and he wanted to partner with me on the newsletter, and also taking the show from WGBB Island, Long Island, which had a great signal, but it wasn't Manhattan. And then he said we should take the show to New York City, and he wanted to partner with me and then fund the show, and then we'd sell the advertising and send the newsletters. But he was very ambitious. He was very aggressive, and as we both would admit to now, we both didn't quite understand the philosophies each other had. The philosophies we had of the business, where he saw it more as a television show, WWE characters, more entertainment than me being a journalist at the time, even though he had the journalism degree. So it was kind of an uneasy feeling for me. It was kind of a gut feeling where I'm like, there's something not quite right about this. And although I also was kind of ambitious, and I said, well, the guy is willing to put up the money, which I didn't have. So we started this ill-fated partnership. And the ill-fated partnership only lasted for about 4 months. Once we officially got in business together and we took the show to WEVD in New York City and started the Pro Wrestling Spotlight newsletter, immediately we had conflict with each other. And that was mostly surrounding the scandals that were taking place in the first quarter of 1992. And it kind of blew up after only 3 months on the air when he was invited to a steroid symposium by the WWF, and I was told, he was told not to bring me, and he kept that from me. So we blew up, the partnership ended, and literally we had this war that lasted up until the time I got out of the business in 96. I hated the guy, and I use that term not with the easiest of words, because I don't like the word hate, and I never really hated anyone as much as I hated him. So anyway, I mean, years go by, he becomes who he becomes, and I have no regrets. I mean, he came in, he had a purpose, he did what he wanted to do. He went through me like shit through a goose, pretty much, very quickly, and he achieved some incredible success as he ventured into and then eventually became an employee of the WWF and one of Vince's top confidants and writers. So that's kind of where it stopped. But I mean, I after a lot of years, I moved to Nashville, went into the music business, was a high executive for a television network in Nashville. I did a lot of deals with national advertisers and country music performers, and I had met Dixie Carter, which is another whole story. I mean, the whole story is a book, and there will be a book. And I saw Vince at a TNA TV taping, I think it was 2009, and that was way after a lot of it happened. And I kind of went up to him, said hello, and that was that. And it wasn't until November of this past year, Thanksgiving, when he did a podcast, one of his podcasts, Truth with Consequences, that my nephew heard him talking about me. And it was kind of, it wasn't disparaging, but the way he portrayed me was not accurate. And I had read his book, and he had trashed me in his book in a way that he doesn't believe he did, but I think there was a lot of disparity there too. I let the book go, but after the podcast, I was like, you know what? I need to answer this guy. I need from my own conscience and for my own satisfaction, I need to have a conversation with him publicly. So I went to Matt Kuhn and asked if I accepted a challenge that he had. Anyone who had any problem with him, he gladly booked him on Truth with Consequences, and that's what happened. So I mean, we had this YouTube chat, which is a 2-hour chat, which is up on YouTube now, and I said everything I needed to say. I kind of talked it out with him, and he got very emotional in that interview, and I kind of felt like a weight was lifted off of me. But when that happened, I started a Twitter account, and just for shits and giggles more than anything else. And all of a sudden, I started putting up these little pieces of content, and people reacted, engaged with them. And I'm like, there may be something here. This nostalgia thing is kind of cool. So that's what led me to where we are today. But as far as Russo goes, getting back to him, I wish the guy the best. I think he's in a world right now where he's kind of trapped. He can't get out of the wrestling business, even though he really would like to. And I met him personally in December because I was visiting relatives in Colorado, and I had a breakfast with him, with my nephew who was there, and we had a really good breakfast, and we parted as I guess friends, if you want to say friends. So I mean, all of those bad feelings, the negativity, the past, the page has been turned, the book has been shut, and I wish him the very best.
One last thing on Vince Russo then, because I've always been curious about this, and even as I think about asking you the question, I'm not you, so I don't have the same perspective, so it might not be as difficult to answer as it might be. I don't know. But are you, all of this for lack of better terms, are you surprised by Vince Russo's success, any of his achievements along the way, from meeting him in the Pro Wrestling Spotlight days to the peak of his career? Has any of him getting to any of the levels or places that he's gotten, does any of that, again, for lack of a better term, surprise you?
Oh yeah, I was surprised. I was totally surprised, because when we put out the first newsletter, and this is what really started his wars with Dave Meltzer and Wade Keller and what he calls the dirt sheet writers. When the first issue was sent out, all of them were like, his writing is so juvenile. He's bringing, he's not on par with you. I mean, as far as who you are and who he is, and they just thought his writing was a bit juvenile. And I never, even his first carnations of his Vicious Vincent's World of Wrestling, the radio show that he started on WGBB, it was kind of infantile. It was juvenile. And so I didn't, when he started achieving the success that he did, and I started finding out more and more about him, I was quite surprised. I was kind of like, well, maybe if I followed, his way, I could have been, also someone who was prominent in the business. But that's about the only regret, or I wouldn't even say bitterness, because once I got out of the wrestling business, my life changed in such a dramatically better way in all aspects of my life, that I was doing quite well. So I was kind of like, well, yeah, he's doing great. I'm doing great. I mean, I guess it all, happened for a reason. But I was surprised in the beginning, yes.
In the 80s, this would have been enough to build a sitcom on. It would have been just high concept,
Absolutely.
25 words or less. The fact that you're a New York guy,
Yeah,
and you dip in and out of wrestling, always though successful, always though people can find you, people know who you are, always doing big things when you are involved. But New York, based out of New York, and then boom, open the door, and you're reestablishing yourself, and now you're starting another chapter of your life in Nashville. And again, like in the 80s, that's all you needed. New York to Nashville, you could make a sitcom out of that. And I'm sure in your book and on your show, you'll probably, go into anecdotes about what it's like to be a city kid. I know, Long Island, but a city kid, a Yankee who winds up down south. I lived in Nashville a few months myself. It's awesome down there. But can you tell us a bit about if there was a culture shock moving on to the next step of your life? And as you're starting that chapter in your journey, does it take a while to acclimate? I guess I'll give it back over to you.
Well, I mean, when I left wrestling in '96, I'd gone bankrupt. Okay, in 1996, I was promoting shows. I hated who I'd become, Joel. I really did. I mean, I didn't like the person I had become, and I finally was like, I'm going to turn the page on this, and I did. And I was bankrupt. I weighed almost 400 freaking pounds. I was miserable. I was depressed, and I was lucky enough, as I was looking for a job after I got out of wrestling, to find a little radio station who did country music on Long Island. And I have a history from years previous. I mean, my life is kind of like this jigsaw puzzle, and it's going to be a fascinating read when the book comes out. But I liked country music, and I had discovered an artist back in '81 named Patty Loveless who achieved a lot of fame. And I took a job, begged for a job to be a advertising salesperson. And the day I got the job, I kind of dropped on my knees, which may sound a little outrageous or whatever if you're not a believer in faith or whatever. But I dropped down on my knees and I was like, God, if you give me one chance to redeem myself, to give me an opportunity to succeed, I'll never ever, I'll always treat people with the very best of intentions in business. I'll always underpromise, overdeliver, and I'll become a better person. And lo and behold, that's what happened. I changed my philosophy. I got out of the wrestling mindset, and I achieved great success at this little station. Then I got hired away by a New York City country music station, the biggest one in the market at the time, Y107. I became their director of music marketing. I started visiting Nashville. And then I got an opportunity to open an office for a TV network called Great American Country in 2000 in Nashville, to move to Nashville, to relocate, and to be one of the heads of business development and ad sales and promotions and a liaison with the record companies. And I took the job, moved to Nashville in 2000, and I had great success there. And I did a lot of wonderful things. And so I still watched wrestling, but I was out of it. But, where the end game is like I spent 10 years at GAC, Great American Country. Then I went over to become the vice president of a record company in Nashville called Black River Entertainment, where I brought in and discovered a kid named Kelsey Ballerini, who's probably one of the biggest country stars today. And that's kind of what my journey has been in Nashville. I left the label in late 2013 and started an artist development company in Nashville where I help emerging and artists that are just kind of wanting to break in. I help them raise money through crowdfunding, and then I kind of open doors in Nashville for them. So that's what I've been doing. But the music business has changed so damn much. I mean, from the days, there's no more physical sales. There's no more even downloads. It's all streaming. It's a generation of new executives and kids coming into the business that, quite frankly, I don't have a passion for anymore, but I'm still trying to help artists. And that's why I'm kind of looking at this phase of my life now as a transitional period for me. And I've always loved wrestling. I've always followed it still, even though I'm not in it. And now I'm kind of finding like, yeah, I think there's a place for me as a historian and to share memories with wrestling fans today, because I think nostalgia is a very big aspect today for fans who really follow the sport.
No, I agree with you entirely. And I'm sure a mutual friend of ours, a mutual acquaintance of ours, John Pantozzi, is on this show quite frequently doing a This Day in Wrestling History. And
I love
it's
John.
he's a great guy. And it's very, very important just to know the history of something. You know, if you're a student of any kind of game, if you're learning about anything, it's very important to know what it has come from. And so Pro Wrestling Spotlight then and now is on the horizon. And I'm sure, again, like everything else that you've done in wrestling, I'm sure it's set up to be, it's going to be a big thing. My curiosity is, you know, I want to kind of hear from the horse's mouth, going in, what do you hope to accomplish with it? How is it going to, are there going to be any parallels at all to the old Pro Wrestling Spotlight from 30 years ago? How's it going to be similar, different from the stuff that's out there today, and what's going to make it must listen?
Well, I mean, it's going to be really unique, and this is only the first phase of a roll-up. Now that I've committed to coming back in, this is going to be the first phase of a rollout. And Pro Wrestling Spotlight Then and Now, which I'm partnering with Brian Last and the Arcadian Network, they do some really great podcasts. And Brian Last knows my history, and he's somebody that I've grown to have a good friendship with, and that I trust. It's going to be different. It's going to be cool. It's going to be unearthing audio content. And here's the thing about me, and Jim Cornette said last week that I'm a man after his own heart, because I've saved literally everything I've ever done in wrestling. I saved every single interview that I had as a Aftermag reporter back in.
Yeah, I saw pictures of the I guess the cassettes either on Twitter or Instagram. But yeah, it's cool to look at all that
my
stuff.
backstage interviews from the World WWWF in 1974 and 75, and when I have all the old college Pro Wrestling Spotlight shows. I have all the interviews I did for Pro Wrestling Spotlight, the 1989 to 96 version. I have all the radio shows with the exception of the ones I gave Wade Keller, and he's given me back the original cassettes, and the stuff that I gave him is still going to be housed on him for his VIP members. But it's going to be a retrospective in a way of what happened on Pro Wrestling Spotlight 30 years ago. For example, in August of 1989, when Ricky Steamboat left the NWA, WCW, play that show, play that interview, and then bring them on to talk about what happened 30 years ago. But there'll be other features of this original content that has never before been unearthed or heard by anyone. So that's what the show's going to be focusing on.
That
It's
sounds
nostalgia-based. If there's a topic that warrants, a discussion, I don't want to be too involved with what's going on in the business today. So, I really want to keep it light and fun and educational, informative, and just something like every week, wow, you're going to hear John with Captain Lou Albano or the Grand Wizard or Fred Blassie in these classic interviews, or Bruno Sammartino, and then the Pro Wrestling Spotlight had like Cactus Jack's first, real intensive. He used to practice his promos on Pro Wrestling Spotlight back in the early days, in the 89, 90. So all of that
Absolutely.
stuff is going to, and have enough content to last for many years. But that's just a phase one. I have a brand which is called Matt Memories, and the Matt Memories are going to be a little bit more, that's where the book comes in. So there'll be a book that will be called Matt Memories, and I'm in very deep and discussions with a major publisher who I'm having lunch with on Saturday. I have a great writer to work with me who a lot of people are going to say, wow, you got that writer to work with you. So all of this stuff is now coming together. But what I also have on the Matt Memories front is a is a concept for a TV show, or whether it's a YouTube show, or if it's a Netflix show, or if it's even if it's something for WWE Network or whatever. I've been talking to a lot of people about doing these memory shows where each show is a video show about a specific event that happened back in time. Like a couple of the pilots that I've shot, feature, the first day I met Fred Blassie. And I backed it up with audio interviews I did with him and photographs, and also 8mm film that I shot as a kid at Madison Square Garden, which I have over 50 matches from the early 70s. So that is something I'm very excited about. So it's a rollout, which starts off with Pro Wrestling Spotlight Then and Now, and then by the middle of 2020, if everything goes as I hope it will, there'll be all kinds of content out there.
That's great. I'm going to keep an eye out for it. Just as a fan, just as somebody who who is the kind of person that would gravitate towards it organically, I'll find it. But I mean, we'll stay in touch for sure.
It's blowing my head off my body when I hear some of this stuff and things. Because you also got to remember that I was a promoter for a while. I did international tours.
Yeah.
I partnered with AAA on promoting shows for lucha shows. And I have all of this video content and these matches that have never been seen before, including, Caracas, Venezuela, when I teamed Sabu up with Psychosis against Conan and Rey Mysterio in Caracas. No one has ever seen it, but a lot of people have heard about it. Right. So, I mean, that's another spectrum and area of all the video tapes and all of the conventions and the so I mean, there's enough content. I have so much that literally for years, there could be some great stuff that the wrestling fans can see, and I think people are going to go nuts over this stuff.
I know our time is limited. I don't want to keep you on much, longer than I said I would. So I want to wrap up in a little bit, but
okay.
It may seem out of sequence. It may seem like we're going back a little bit, but I'd be remiss because the conventions really, for me, are memories that are just unanythingable, irreplaceable. Just they're just milestones. They're just markers they're bricks in my childhood. Could you tell us one or two funny, crazy? I don't want to take away. I know, again, just like, your transition to Nashville, these conventions I know are going to be really, really entertaining anecdotes that people can hear about from you on your brand, on your show. I get that. But I would be remiss in doing my audience, I think, a disservice if I didn't please ask or beg you for at least one unbelievable, mind-numbing, just walk away from this episode and this interview just baffled and flabbergasted, one crazy story from those early 90s days of doing those first Weekend of Champions conventions?
Well, it's towards the latter was. I mean, if there's a mind-blowing crazy event, I mean, it was actually getting the original Sheik to perform, to appear at a convention. That blew my mind. That was crazy. And the fact that he stayed in character and he chasing some people around with a big sword, I mean, that was crazy. I mean, there's so many. I have to really just stop and think about that for a while. But, I mean, there were so many of those types of situations that took place. The time that Sabu went through the table at a show that I did at the convention, and I charged him for it like an idiot. I had to, and then we sold pieces off of it for him to get his money back. So, I mean, there's just so many different things that I could bring up, but, hilarious moments, I don't know. I mean, for me, those conventions were painstakingly intense to put together, and while I was there, I was just so crazed, just making sure everything was running smoothly and everyone was having a good experience from it. So I hope that didn't disappoint you, but those are just kind of things that immediately pop into my mind. And I'm sure there are other crazy moments were in the bar in 1991 when Ric Flair was taking his pants down and dancing around, and and Buddy Rogers is sitting there, and Ric Flair buying drinks for everyone, and Terry Funk buying drinks for everyone, and I mean, but Flair, Rogers in the same room drinking, that was wild. Yeah. That was wild. That was just kind of like, for me, it was surreal, just having those two out of everyone appear at a Weekend of Champions.
In the lead up to us releasing this episode, I'm going to definitely get all over Twitter and Instagram, and I'm going to put pictures of myself and wrestling stars that I had the opportunity to meet thanks to you running these conventions, from a couple of the conventions that I went to. And I'm going to put pictures of autographs and just all different stuff that came into my life by way of stuff like the UWF Fan Expo, Weekend of Champions, anything like that I find. I'm going to throw that up in the promotion and the kind of marketing for this episode.
Oh, yeah, well, you now triggered something too, the UWF. Okay. When her
I'm sure. Yeah,
that was the most. That had to be the most outrageous thing. When I didn't know him from Adam really, and he came in like a house of fire. Does his first press conference, Meltzer there, and that I think he said Bruiser Brody was going to be in the promotion, who had actually been murdered, and Blackjack Mulligan was going to be his booker, and at the time Blackjack Mulligan was in jail. So I mean, the outrageous statements that he did, and also they did a pull apart with Dan Spivey and Blair, which was outrageously, incredibly bizarre, funny, and that was probably the outrageous, bizarre thing that happened in any one of my conventions, to bring and introduce the UWF at the 1990 Pro Wrestling Spotlight Convention.
That was a moment in time. It was.
But I look forward to seeing your content. I've seen one picture recently that you posted as a kid with somebody, and I'm like,
most of the pictures I'm finding are from. Oh my God, John! You hope? No, you should know. You can know that it definitely. I was hopeful to be one of these characters one of these days, and eventually I was.
Did.
But I did, and so many people. Look, I got to work with Rick Rude, which was a blessing and an honor and a privilege. And when's the first time I met Rick Rude? I met Rick Rude when I met him at the Weekend of Champions. So it's just. Whether it's meeting Ric Flair or whether it's, whoever it was, these are definitely moments that made me aspire even more and just kind of, I always said to myself, I'd like to be somebody who's meeting fans and, just talking to them about, hey, how's your day, and signing an autograph. I always, as much of a thrill as I got from being the person on the one side of the table, I always, wanted to be on the other side of the table as well. And I got to see what it was like from both sides. And then also as a vendor, the first business that I ever started, Wrestling Videotape Express, when I was a tape trader, I got to be a tape trader at your conventions too, and give Ric Flair, best of Ric Flair volume 1, 2, and 3 on VHS, take a Polaroid with him. Just outstanding memories, like I say, that are irreplaceable and priceless. But yeah, man, I'm going to put some of these pictures up, and a lot of them are from the UWF Fan Expo in 91. A lot of them are from the Weekend of Champions in 91. But some cool stuff that I want to share with everybody and just show them the kind of stuff that was out there, because really it was the precursor to all of today's conventions.
Mm-hmm. Well, I wish I was a smarter businessman back then to grow it like it was grown, but I guess a lot of people said I was ahead of my time in a lot of the things I did. And I'm just so happy that wrestling conventions are now robust, successful. WrestleCon this weekend is going to be outrageously fun for me to even walk around and start seeing people that I did business with, and hopefully some of the fans will recognize me from years ago. But I just love the way the business is right now. I love how great it's become in regard to fan interaction with performers. And if I had a little something to do with that, 30 years ago or 29 years ago when I did the first one, then I can be really proud of that.
Folks, it's funny having John Arezzi on this episode, being a convention king himself, and we may or may not be willing to go double or nothing on Joel's hints from earlier this episode when we were talking about Vegas at the end of May. But it's just been announced that he will be appearing for an Extreme Arena backdrop photo op meet and greet at StarCast 2 and will serve as a producer working on behalf of Conrad Thompson for StarCast on Fight, of course that being on the Fight TV app. Here now, a blast from the past and a brainchild of Joel and previous producer Josephini. This is The Elite fused with Pat Benatar for a music/audio of sorts we call Invincible.
I liked it right away because I thought to myself, man, that guy's as crazy and as ambitious as us, Nick. So I said, hey, let's take this guy, let's ride with him, let's dine with him, let's hang out with him.
Hangman never paid for a single meal, by the way.
Hangman's like 21 years old, he's too young to pay for meals. But Cody came to us with this wild idea. He said, Young Bucks, Bullet Club, I think that we could put 10,000 asses and 10,000... And knowing that my brother and I are pretty much up to absolutely anything. I mean, we invaded Raw that one time.
Guys, technically we were in the mall across the street.
Hey, man. But it didn't take just 3 men. It didn't take just the Young Bucks and Cody. It took each and every one of the people standing in this ring. This was a group collaboration. All the people in the band. And most importantly, as cheesy as it sounds, all 10,000 plus of you. Those 4 hours and 57 minutes, oh my God, was our vision of what we think we can do with pro wrestling. Do you want more of this? Yeah! Sometimes you go double or nothing. Yeah! We have no graphic, we're not making an announcement. It's just something that, we're brainstorming, we're talking about, we're spitballing. But if you guys want it, you want more pro wrestling from a cast of Being the Elite, and my family, my great friends, my cast of bandits, we will give you more of this, because we couldn't have done this without you. Chicago, this was one of my favorite, you know what? This was my favorite night of my career.
I was blown away, what could I say? It all seemed to make sense. You're taking away everything, and I can't deal with that. I try to see the good in life, but good things in life are hard to find. Well, blow it away, can we make this something good? Well, I try to do it right this time around, and let's start over. and not